Okay, so this is me going over my lesson plan, and I'm gonna practice kind of teaching it. Now, I do teach a life skills classroom right now, but it's just um, and I could have done this in front of them, but I just didn't get to it over the weekend with Thanksgiving and everything. So I am doing a propaganda assignment, and hopefully I can get this done in my government class eventually. But I'm gonna do a propaganda assignment during my government class. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind before I start my lesson is a lot of my kids, three of my kids in my classroom are hand over hand, and so some of these art activities might be difficult for them. So they're gonna need things that are put in place to help them out. So I'm going to kind of go through and talk through that as I kind of go through the lesson plan and go over kind of some of the materials and some of the things that I would do. But some of my kids are hand over hand. So I've got 6 students in class. Okay, so I'll have 6 students in that self-contained government class. 3 of those students are going to be hand over hand. They all have autism, and they're probably at a reading level of about kindergarten to first grade. And then for the other 3 students, they're varying levels from about third to fifth grade, and these are age 18, 16 to 19-year-olds. I have one 21-year-old. His is last year, and so the 21-year-old is autistic, functioning around a third grade level, and then I have a Down syndrome student who I have things put in place, but he is someone who struggles staying on task. And he has I do have 2 aides in the classroom as well. So I'm gonna be whenever I do my lesson, I'm gonna have 2 of the kids with me, probably one of the hand over hand kids, and then the autistic kid who has behaviors, and then the other 4 students are gonna be split between my aides, and they're gonna have those two. So one of them's gonna have the 2 students that are pretty okay and pretty independent, and then the other aide that I have really good is probably gonna be with people who need more support. Okay, so that's just kind of a background on my students first before we go into this and the propaganda assignment. Okay, so obviously I did for my standards I did SSH, which was 9 through 12, which was evaluate how historical events and developments were shaped by unique circumstances in time and place. And then some of my art standards were evaluate, select, and apply methods to process appropriate and display artwork in a specific phase. Okay, so these students are going to be, so this is how we're going to start it out. Okay, so during the intro, students are going to review some of the key concepts. So now we're going over World War II. So if we're doing a World War II propaganda assignment, these students are going to recall based on some of the things that we've talked about in class. Now, since these students are the cognitive ability that they are going to be given a note sheet that is going to have their last assignments, kind of the things we went over. So we went over whenever Germany invaded France, and we went over we were briefly going over like internment camps and the ways that Jewish people were affected during the war. Okay, so the students are going to be taking the role of the Germans. So I would go in front of the class and I would be like, "Hey class, today we are going to be creating a propaganda assignment for World War II. So can somebody tell me about what does propaganda mean?" And they probably wouldn't know what this means, especially my students. And so then I would come out and I would say, "Okay, so propaganda is news that is brought out by the government in the form of usually graphics or news that is pushing an initiative." Okay, and so then I would go over some examples of some propaganda in World War II. So I would go up to my kids and I would have them all in front of me in the smartboard. They would be in the top 2 rows to where they could all see the screen. And in big pictures, I would go, "Okay, kids, so we're going to look at some of the propaganda assignments. So this is what I want you guys to create today. Okay, can anybody tell me about what this is saying?" And we would talk about Germany. "Can anybody tell me about what this piece of propaganda is portraying the Jewish people to be?" Okay, and a lot of those propaganda that the Germany ended up going on World War II, whenever they were talking about the Jewish people, it was demeaning them. There was one that was pretty big that we talked about in class. That was it was a picture of a Jewish man kind of running around with money and taking it from a woman. Okay, and so then I would say, so if this is how we were portraying the Jewish people, then how do you think that the Germans thought about the Jewish people? What did you think that they thought about? Give a second. I'd probably have my kid raise his hand. Probably be Talon in my class. And Talon's not his real name. I'm just totally Throwing a name out there, but it'd probably be a kid named Talon or Rick, one of my students who sits up front, and he would tell me, he would say, the Germans are bad people. And I would say, yes, why are they bad people in this picture? What does it look like the Jewish man is doing? And then I would ask, do you think that this was really happening? And even though my kids are the way they are socially and they can understand this concept, they would probably say no. Now, if they didn't, I would help guide them through that. But then we would kind of talk about Germany's perspective of the war and then talk about Jewish propaganda. I'm probably not going to have them draw one from Germany's perspective. So then once I use those as examples, then I would reference the United States and what we thought about Germany and go over those examples and then have us create propaganda based on Germany from the United States. Okay? So that was my plan for the assignment. This is something that I'm going to do next week. And so then I would be like, okay, students, so we are going over what the United States talked to about Britain, and what did we think about Germany? What did we think about how they were? What did we think about how they treated the Jews? Did we like that? Were they the enemy? Was Hitler the devil? Create something that kind of shows me this, and then I would break into the small groups, and I would sit down maybe with the kids. And I would sit down with my 2 high-functioning kids. And then I would have to give them some prompts, okay? So then if I'm working with, let's say, Josh, okay, and Josh is an autistic kid who needs hand-over-hand support, he would sit down in front of me, and I would be like, okay, Josh, so do we want to draw a picture about Hitler being a devil, or do we want to draw a picture about Hitler being a nice guy? And this might be seem like a really simple prompt, but with my kids, this is the big deal. And so they need to know whether or not this guy was a good guy or this guy was a bad guy and why. And they might not be able to understand all of these things, but if I'm able to get them to grasp the prospect that he's either a devil or he's a bad guy, then we can start to formulate something on a piece of paper like a propaganda assignment with my kids. Okay, so let's say we do that with them, and we sit down and I think I said Josh. So then Josh says he's a bad guy. And then I'd be like, okay, Josh, so we're going to look up some pictures of some bad guys, and we're going to put it on your Chromebook. Okay, so then I'd have him Google, and I'd prompt him to Google out. I would have to tell him exactly what to Google, so I'd get a whiteboard, and I would say, picture of bad man. Probably what I would do with Josh. Okay, so then I would have picture of bad man. We would pull that up on images, and this would kind of be a modeling thing with these kids. This is just what my kids are able to do. So then with modeling, we would have my student that has special needs. He would be able to look at that. And even my hand-over-hand kids can pretty much do this. They just, modeling they can do. They might not do it perfectly. I have one student that I physically have to take my hand and work with her hand. So then I would have to trace, and I would have to have them do the propaganda assignment by doing that. Let's call her Olivia. And so then with Olivia, I would have her sit down next to me, and I would do the same prompt. I should say, were the Germans good guys or were the Germans bad guys? And then she would pick a hand. Or I could ask it like a yes or no question. It could be like, were the Germans a good guy, yes or no? And that would be how they would respond to that. Then I would wait. I would give time. Sometimes it takes 10 to 20 seconds for them to respond just to comprehend it. Sometimes I have to respond this multiple times. So if I'm working with a student, then I would have to say it again. And then we would go over, based on that student. Then if once, let's say Olivia said yes or no, then I would say, okay, Olivia, today we're going to create a propaganda assignment about how that Germany was the bad guys. And then she'd probably nod her head yes, okay? And I'd be like, okay, so we're going to draw a picture. We're going to first look up what some bad guys maybe look like, and then we might add some Germans. We might make it a German officer, or we might make the German officer doing a bad thing, okay? And usually with some of my more independent students, I will let them, with this topic, because it's art, get a little more gruesome. I had one of my students, whenever we did World War I, they drew Germany like a devil or something like that, and that was their interpretation of art, and I allow it to happen. So if they want to draw, like in this sense, they want to draw guns, they want to draw something kind of bad happening, I do. Now with some of my kids, socially, they can't really understand that. So maybe I would just have this German officer stealing candy, and so I'd be like, Olivia, so we're gonna draw a picture of this German officer taking candy, okay? And so then I would write out on a whiteboard. I would say, let's Google someone stealing candy. Okay, so they would say someone stealing candy. They would type it into their Chromebook, and then whenever they do that, then I have Olivia down. I have the picture of that, and then hand over hand. So I would trace this out for her, and I would trace out this guy drawing to the best of my ability. I'm not an artist, but I would do that. So I would trace out the picture of the person stealing candy, maybe from a kid or a baby or something, and then we would draw the picture, and then I would ask Olivia, "Do you think that that person is a good or a bad man?" Now, with Olivia's student, you might not get the right answer back, and that's okay. That's just how my students are, and I love them to death. But sometimes they can't comprehend it. I would say half of my class, maybe 60-70% of my class, would be able to do this. And I know this is different from a regular ed classroom, but this would be how we would do art in my self-contained classroom for high school. So this is kind of what I was planning on doing. So they would create that art assignment, and we would kind of go up. But that would be kind of how I taught it. I know it's probably different than a lot of the other people that are giving the submissions, but this is me practicing it, and this is kind of what I would do and what I plan on doing in class with my kids. I think that art is something that's been really cool. I mean, when I started this class, I did something that we did in class. I'm totally blanking on it. But I've been trying to integrate art more just because we've been doing stuff. But I mean, you should see some of these kids light up, and a lot of my kids, they don't get like arts classes because we don't have enough aides in our classes, and these kids are self-contained with the behavior plans that they have. They're not able to get a lot of art classes. None of these kids are really able to go to art class, or some of these kids have never even left my room before. I know I'm a first-year teacher, and a lot of these kids have been in the program since they've been in the special ed self-contained since they were elementary students, and they don't get out much because of the behavior problems. But they love art, and so this is something that I think this is one way I could be able to bridge the two and get the kids to do that. Another way I've been able to incorporate art, and we've done it through my field visit with Mr. Pierce over at Greenville, is we've gotten students to kind of draw beginning, end, middles, and ends, and that's been something that's kind of worked too. But whenever I'm thinking of government and how I would do this, I think this would be a really good opportunity to do for my kids, even though they might not understand it. So this would be how I would do the propaganda assignment, and that's how I'd kind of go about the lesson plan that we wrote, and kind of just go through all of these. And so I'm just going off the one that I had last time whenever I created the G lesson plan, but some of those standards are in that if you need me to check on it. And yeah, so that's what I would do.